Welcome, Roman, to Crestview at the Cave, where we explore the world of real estate and insurance and put the two together like never before. I'm your host, Josh Berkowitz, and I'm here to make sure you get the settlement you deserve. On this podcast, we're going to be speaking about insurance and law, and we have Roman Rabinovich from WILKOFSKY, FRIEDMAN, KAREL Cummins. He's a first-party insurance attorney located in New York City, and we're going to be hearing Roman's insights on the insurance industry, some bank failures, insurance failures, and most of all, we'll be sitting down with some big real estate players at this table and big insurance players, and putting the two together and helping our viewers make better informed decisions in the future. So get ready to strap in and learn something new with every episode. And my guest at Crestview at the Cave. Thanks for coming, Roman.
Thanks for having me, Josh, and I'm excited. These are all great topics.
Awesome. So why don't we get started here? Hot topic, over the past 10 days has been bank failures, one in California, one in New York. You're based in New York, so, definitely interested to see. A lot of people have been talking to me this week how is that possibly connected to insurance companies? Just, thought to bring that up, see what your thoughts are.
Right. So, well, first of all, thank you for having me. Most people don't realize that the same issues that plague banks plague insurance companies. So just like a bank could fail, you could have an insurance company that fails. And right now, for example, we have one that's big in Florida but has a footprint in New York and New Jersey, UPC. So all the folks that have claims.
For people who don't know that, UPC is United Property Casualty?
Correct.
Okay, because there's one other company that's like similar name.
Correct. And anybody who's holding a policy from that particular insurance company, just like if you have deposits with the banks that are going under, it may not be worth what it was worth when you purchased it.
Got it. And are you just wondering, are there other potential insurance companies that are out there that you think are lingering potentially to fail?
Yeah, interesting question. We always say that a lot of carriers are one good storm away from failure, and it's impossible to predict. I mean, they all sort of represent that they're liquid and they can handle the claims process, but sometimes you don't know. And
Sure.
if you own one of those policies, the best thing to do is shop for a new policy before disaster strikes.
And who are the companies or the agencies that oversee the insurance companies and the banks? Is it the same company, or is it different? Is it a different entity?
Yeah, interestingly, it's the same agencies that oversee the banking industry, also the insurance industry. So in New York, for example, it's DFS, the Department of Financial Services. In New Jersey, it's DOBI, the Department of Banking and Insurance, and the two are sort of intertwined. And just like they regulate banks, they regulate insurance companies, and they would help insureds if their carrier or company becomes insolvent. They would help guide them through the process of how to get their claim paid.
So this, just to dumb it down for myself and everyone else that's listening to this, if you have a insurance claim with UPC in New York, are you dealing with FIGA because that's a financial department of Florida, or are you dealing with the Department of Financial Banking in New York?
So it gets complicated depending on carriers that are foreign carriers but admitted in the state versus domestic carriers. It gets a little technical, but DOBI, DFS are good starting points for anybody who's got a concern and a claim with a carrier that is in some form of liquidation.
Sure. All right, interesting. Another, everybody who watches some of the recent podcasts that we, had a couple of weeks ago probably has an understanding of what public adjusters do. But, for those of you who don't know what public adjuster does, we are first-party advocates for policyholders against insurance companies when they have property damage. We also personally, our company started working on cyber insurance claims over the past year and a half. But obviously they work together with first-party, insurance litigators.
Sure.
So would like to hear your thoughts on what is the role of a public adjuster in your eyes, and how is that potentially connected to a first-party, insurance, attorney out there?
Sure. So for me, you guys are on the front lines, right? You're there advocating on behalf of an insured, presenting their claim before it gets litigated, but you're there guiding them every step of the way. You're telling them what their policy covers, what it doesn't cover. You're guiding them through the claims preparation and presentation process. And you're basically, as far as I'm concerned, making sure that the insured not necessarily maximizes the claim, but they get everything that they're entitled to. And as far as I'm concerned, that's an invaluable service to anyone who is faced with a catastrophic loss and maybe struggling for guidance and help.
So a lot of people ask me all the time, like, well, am I allowed to hire a public adjuster? Like, are there, how would you answer that if someone asked you that?
You are absolutely allowed to hire a public adjuster. My firm represents a couple of the industries, New York, New Jersey, some of the others around the nation, and public adjusting is a profession that I think is often overlooked, but quite noble, because you're helping people at their most vulnerable. As far as I'm concerned, it's no different than a nurse or a doctor helping a patient when he's sick. You're helping somebody get what they're entitled to from the vehicle, from the insurance vehicle that they purchased. So absolutely hire a public adjuster if you need it. They're professionals regulated by the state in most jurisdictions, and are invaluable as far as guiding a claim. Interestingly, one of the trends I've been seeing is more and more carriers are putting in anti-public adjusting provisions in their policies and almost signaling to the public that they don't need them. So for all you guys listening, if you have such a policy, number one, you may want to think twice about continuing with that particular carrier. But I'm here to tell you from 20 years of experience that going at it alone is difficult. Insurance companies, that's all they do is adjust claims, thousands of times a day. For you, it's just
so to break this down for someone who doesn't even know like what a public adjuster is, and maybe they're just learning about it, the anti-public adjustment language is in the actual physical policy. Is it there to say you cannot hire a public adjuster, or is it there to say we recommend that you don't hire a public adjuster? Right.
So the language has varied, but they can't say that you're prohibited, because you guys are licensed, as I said, and licensed professionals that are overseen by the state. But what they do tell you is little things like, well, you don't need a public adjuster because we're going to do the work for him and we're going to adjust your claim fairly, so why pay somebody else? The other thing they say is, well, if you hire a public adjuster, it's going to end up taking you longer to settle the claim, because based on our experience, it just takes longer with a PA, with a public adjuster.
Got it. And we're not here today to bash insurance companies, but we all know that we're not the ones delaying claims. It's more on the insurance companies. And someone who's been in the industry for much longer than me, as a public adjuster, and has been probably a public adjuster since the 70s, he said that, a policyholder can just, close the claim out quickly with the insurance company, but they might be leaving like half the dollars amount that they're owed on the table. So, if you hire a public adjuster or hire an attorney to represent you, like, we're going to get you the money that you are deserved, not just like, take 30% of what your claim is worth.
Yeah, expediency does not always mean fair and equitable results, and sometimes it means the opposite.
Definitely. A very common question that we get on a regular basis is a client will call us, and it happened twice this week with us. It was a residential house and a hotel. Client calls us with saying that have a sewage backup in their property, or sewage that came up out of like the drains. So there is in your policy on a residential and commercial like water backup, but there's also a term in the insurance industry called an inline clog, and there's a big difference in terms of coverages.
Right.
So would like to hear your expert thoughts and opinion on that, and
Sure.
how to educate people how to make the right decision when they have an instance like that.
Sure, and it is quite common. So first, just to understand what the distinction between the two is, inline clogs are the way we see it is domestic water from within your plumbing system that is obstructed by something in the plumbing that can't exit. And a backup, also known as a sewer backup, is water that is not from within your system, typically from the street, that comes in, backs up into your property, typically from a bathroom or a sink.
Sure. And in terms of coverages, can you explain to us like how the coverages work?
Sure. So the clog is more often than not covered. It's covered by most homeowners policies, covered in most commercial policies. The sewer backup coverage isn't as robust. And so very often there's a limitation, there may be a sublimit, and so insurance companies very often try to, under the right circumstances, especially if there's a storm outside, they try to claim that
It was
water
water
damage,
backup.
that it's water backup as opposed to an inline clog, even though the two can occur at the same time.
And so when you're looking at a homeowner policy or a commercial policy, maybe one day we'll just bring it up on the screen to show you, but you have like coverage A, which would be the dwelling. So from my understanding is if you have an inline clog, which is a clog within the actual property, it's not a clog from outside, it has to be a clog within the property, and that creates backup in the property. You have the limit of coverage up until coverage A. So if you have $1 million in coverage, that means from this inline clog, you have $1 million in coverage. But
Correct.
if you told your insurance company that I had a water backup because maybe you didn't read what actual water backup is, you might be subject to the water backup cap, which could be sometimes $10,000, $20,000, and is that how you understand it?
Absolutely, and it just goes to your point from before as far as why do you need a public adjuster? It's that little nuance as far as how you present the claim, how you report the claim, can mean all the difference between whether you're paid and indemnified for your loss or whether you find out that you're only going to be paid a fraction of it.
So I have to ask you this: what happens if someone put the claim in, water backup, and now they call us or they call you? Can someone out there get it overturned if you find out the right facts?
Yeah, it makes it more difficult because insurance companies at the end of the day are people, and people become entrenched. And once they've sort of tagged the claim in a certain way, it makes it very difficult to get them off of that position. But that's where you come in as
Sure.
an advocate. You present evidence, factual, where you point to the fact that it's one scenario versus the other. Sure. That's where the advocacy begins, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, no, I've seen recently, we do a lot of stuff in the New York area also, but people have like commercial buildings and they don't have the proper backup. And a lot of times you're dealing with like tenants that have a commercial space, like it could be a restaurant that has a tremendous amount of grease that's going through the main line, and they could have backups all the time, but if they don't have the right coverages, it's important, it could ruin a claim for them, in the future.
Absolutely. I mean, risk management is a growing field, and
Sure.
Certainly every business, depending on the industry they're in and where they're located, should investigate. But reporting the claim properly and getting what you're entitled to is, I think, where it begins. And again, if you don't have a good understanding of the distinction, you end up making a mistake, and that could end up costing you.
So let's use an example. This did not happen, but obviously just to help people understand how the duties after loss works. So a client has a fire yesterday, they contact the insurance company, and the insurance company says, we won't be able to come out there for 7 days. Sometimes that happens. What does the insured do? What does the policyholder do at that time?
Sure. So hopefully they have the good sense to call a public adjuster
Obviously.
who could guide them. But
Doesn't always happen, but yeah.
But for those that don't, it's a minefield because you always have to balance your duties under the policy, and the duties are quite large. You have to report the claim timely, you have to report it accurately, et cetera, et cetera. But then on the other hand, you have a duty to mitigate. And very often your duty to mitigate, which means keep the property from sustaining more damage, is counterbalanced or competes with your duty to give the insurance company an opportunity to inspect the loss. So
Sure.
let's say in your example you have a fire, the insurance company tells you they can't get out there for a couple of days, a week, but it's the middle of summer, and your professionals are telling you if you don't take certain steps like tearing out the sheetrock, the insulation, you're going to have a mold problem throughout the building.
Yeah, of course.
Whereas right now it's confined to a small space, right? So you've got competing interests there, and it's a very delicate area. My recommendation would be at that point to take direction from the insurance company, get in touch with your adjuster, get in touch with your claim representative at the company, and tell them what you plan on doing and get their okay. But the better course of action is to have a experienced, guided professional, because they'll know what obligations you have and try to balance them so you could get, you could fulfill both.
So on that note, and obviously when we get involved in losses, we document everything using a Matterport, like a 3D camera and also some other technology. For that exact reason, our client might start doing the mitigation emergency work right away, but we documented everything how it was before they did that work. So we'll go in sometimes and 3D image the property before the work is done, like right when the water loss happened or fire loss, and then go in and Matterport it again right after it. So we just have the documentation there for the insurance company to see and question us.
Absolutely, and if the average insured doesn't have that kind of equipment, that's where sort of things begin to go in the insurance company's favor, because Matterport videos are invaluable when you're going back and trying to piece together what happened.
So I have to ask this question to you. It's on this topic. You have the duties after loss in the policy, right? It doesn't say anywhere in that, when you're reading that part of the policy, that you need to call the insurance company to get their approval to do mitigation or do any work. Does a policyholder need to get the insurance company's approval? Like it says, you have to protect the property from further damage. So why, if I'm a regular policyholder out there that has water damage, I need to just fix it. I need to mitigate this. Where does it, like, why do you even need to contact them? Obviously it's good faith to let them know I'm doing this, but if the insurance company's not coming out for a week, I'm doing what the policy says. Like, would that ever be an issue?
It's a huge issue, and thank you for bringing it up. There's a great word in insurance coverage, which is ambiguity, and ambiguity is exactly what it means. A lot of terms and a lot of obligations and a lot of what you should be doing is ambiguous, and the way it becomes unambiguous is through experience, through guidance, through having gone through it before. So while an insured, again, because they have one catastrophic loss, may not know what to do, somebody who handles a couple of dozen a week will be more prepared to handle it. So you're right, the policy never says you have to do X, including call the insurance company for permission. But if you want to take away their argument later on that you acted in a way that you shouldn't have, it's a good place to start. So here's a tip for you guys. Always go to your insurance adjuster if in doubt and take your guidance from him.
Sure.
He can't tell you later on that you did something you weren't supposed to.
I would say from my experience on that tip is make sure to get it in writing, because, people could say things over the phone, but I always end the conversation like, just send that in writing, because a lot of times they will not put in writing what they say on the phone.
Oh, Josh, it happens more often than you know. Very often I'll have an insured report to me one conversation, and when I'm deposing that adjuster later on, if the claim is denied and in litigation, and they'll totally deny having that conversation, they'll deny having said what the insured reports back.
No, that's a good point. Another topic that I thought we discussed, obviously, that'd be relevant for the viewers, given your experience in appraisal. I know one of your partners wrote a book on appraisal. I want to just dumb it down for myself and the viewers what appraisal is in the policy. Not an appraisal for a real estate transaction, an appraisal in insurance.
Right.
What the appraisal provision is, and how does that benefit the insured?
Sure. So appraisal, first of all, not the same thing as an appraisal in real estate. An appraisal in an insurance policy is very similar to arbitration, which is what more people are familiar with. And it's in every insurance policy in any jurisdiction that is a standard fire policy state, which New York and New Jersey are. And what it basically does is, if the insurance company and you disagree as to the value of what it's going to cost to repair the property, it's a vehicle, it's a mechanism to get that disagreement or that divide bridged, okay? And it's a complicated process. I mean, as you know, one of my partners wrote a book on it, and it grows by the year. But the gist of it is the appraisal process is supposed to be a short circuit for disagreements as to valuation, where one side presents what they think the claim is worth and what it's going to be worth to repair. The insurance company presents their facts, and through the appraisal process, they bridge the gap.
And is there a timeline on that process?
So the appraisal process itself doesn't have a timeline, but there are milestones or things that need to be done along the way. So, for example, you want to demand appraisal quickly as soon as you see there's a disagreement with the insurance company. The insurance company then will either accept or deny your request for appraisal, and then there are timelines for when you have to name your appraiser, when the insurance company has to name their appraiser. But the bottom line is it's a more expedient, more expeditious way to resolve an issue that otherwise may require litigation, a lot more expensive and a lot longer.
So there's an option for a policyholder at that time before they decide to go to appraisal. They could also go the attorney route as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, at that point, our recommendation is, we're busy enough, fortunately, so we don't need that type of business. But the appraisal process was put in as a mechanism, as a vehicle to help the consumer. It's one of the few things in insurance policies that really directly benefit the consumers because it provides for a quick resolution to a process that could take a while.
Can a policyholder, if they go through the appraisal process, can they still hire an attorney?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, we're hired regularly to oversee appraisals. And and the gist of the appraisal process is to keep it neutral and impartial. Those are the terms that you'll see in the appraisal provision in the policy. And we're not looking to do anything that's improper, but we sort of guide the insured and make sure that the insurance company is doing what they should be doing on their side.
Got it. You're making sure the process is getting done and not being delayed or
Precisely.
certain things.
Precisely.
Got it. And then on that topic, what happens if, a claim gets denied? If someone thinks that it should have gotten, accepted as a claim and it gets denied, what should a policyholder be doing in that instance?
Yeah, so hopefully none of your clients are ever in that position, and hopefully none of you listening are ever in that position. But if a claim is denied, you typically have just one option. Some people say writing to the insurance company and asking them to reconsider. Typically that doesn't work for a variety of reasons, including they would sort of have to admit that they made the wrong call the first time when they denied it. So unless you have new facts, and that's the key, unless you have new facts to present, I don't suggest going that route. Litigation then becomes the only option. And litigation, for those of you that don't know, means starting an action in a court that has jurisdiction and naming the insurance company as your defendant in a lawsuit. And there are many considerations that go into whether or not you do that.
Got it. And is that changing in terms of where you, New York, New Jersey, is there a difference between the two states to litigate, or it's kind of very similar?
So the factors that you consider are pretty much universal. Just the highlights for you folks at home are, number one, you want to find out which part, or you want to know what the value of the claim that you're going to be litigating is, right? There's a big difference between litigating a $50,000 claim and a $500,000 claim.
Sure.
So value and how much you're going to be fighting about is key. The other issue that you want to consider is what kind of dispute do you have with the insurance company? Are you disputing coverage, meaning whether the loss is covered and it's a policy interpretation, or are you fighting about whether or not you have to replace a bunch of beams and a bunch of load-bearing walls, and thereby increasing your claim? So all those factors are going to make an impact on whether or not you litigate, because it's going to determine how much money you're going to spend, how many experts you're going to need, and ultimately how long it's going to take for you to recoup your investment. So basically, it becomes a business decision, Josh.
Sure. No, thank you. I mean, I've learned a lot by doing this, having this conversation with you. So I hope that, we do this again in the future. But, thanks everyone for coming to listening to our Crestview at the Cave today. Look forward to presenting more of these conversations with different insurance professionals, real estate professionals, and, stay tuned for our next one.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome.